draft is concerned, there's value in later rounds. Speaking of value, let's talk about the value Tony Romo plays to his team. He's the quarterback, of course, the leader of the Dallas Cowboys. And the good news, he is back on the field throwing at the beginning of the team's offseason program. The first time he has thrown since undergoing back surgery in December. That, of course, forced him to miss the Cowboys' regular season finale. Ed, what's this mean for Romo and the Cowboys?
Well, it's important for them that he's involved in the offseason in a way that he wasn't a year ago. You know, he had back surgery about this time last year, so now he's had 2 operations on his back in the span of less than 12 months. He just turned 34 years old. They have a new offensive coordinator in Scott Linehan, their 3rd different play caller in as many seasons. So it's going to be important for Romo to be an active participant throughout the course of this offseason.
I love when we get to talk Jerry Jones with Ed Werder. It never fails to impress. All right, so what's Jerry Jones got up his sleeve with that 16th pick?
Well, you never know for sure,
well,
but
you know as good as anybody does.
They're coming off one of the worst seasons in franchise history on defense, and I think that's their emphasis. I mean, they'd like to get Aaron Donald because he's a perfect 3 technique for Rod Marinelli's defensive scheme up front as a pass rusher. But if none of those defensive tackles are there, and if Johnny Manziel were to unexpectedly fall as far as 16, I could certainly see him getting strong consideration from Jerry Jones for a lot of the reasons I just said. Tony Romo is 34, coming off 2 back operations. Troy Aikman retired at 34 after a single back operation, and it was back problems, not concussions, that led to his early retirement. And don't forget, I mean, what would this mean in terms of marketing for Jerry Jones? It would ensure that Jerry World would be filled for 5 to 10 years. He didn't have a quarterback after Aikman unexpectedly retired with the injuries, and he's vowed, I think, never to let that happen again.
All right, so you used the word if there, and that's the operative word. If Johnny Manziel were to still be on the board, Mel, I'll ask you, what's the probability that happens?
Nobody expected Aaron Rodgers to drop into the 20s. 2 weeks before the draft, people had him going number 1 overall. That's when Alex Smith went number 1. He dropped into the 20s. It's happened before. What happened with Manziel? Probably not, because you have Cleveland. You have so many teams. Cleveland at 4 all the way down to Minnesota at 8. You have Tennessee even in that mix. And you have the ability maybe of Houston to trade out of 1 and get Manziel with a more palatable portion of round 1. I would be really surprised. Not shocked, but surprised if Manziel was there for the Cowboys. And they have a ton of needs. This is a personnel deficient team. Defensive line. You talk about outside linebacker. Carter needs to step it up. They need a playmaking safety. They need either a tackle on the right side or a guard, another receiver. They need a lot of help. And bringing in Manziel would almost at this stage, I wouldn't say call it a luxury pick. It would be a quarterback that they feel as the heir apparent that falls in their lap. But I don't see no defense if at all they can.
What if he is?
But,
certainly they'd have to look at it closely.
And you know the fandom there no longer embraces Tony Romo as a starter. So there'd be pressure on the team to make the change right away. Romo's not tradable. You know, he just signed a contract that guarantees him $55 million. They had to do a restructure to get him to fit under the cap as it is. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but it would sure be interesting if it did.
It would definitely is in Dallas. Coming up, the Atlanta Falcons own the 6th pick in this year's draft. How likely would they trade up to get Jadeveon Clowney, and at what price? And Saints tight end Jimmy Graham still trying to get a long-term deal done.